Welcome to the Beer Den Podcast. Tonight we'll be drinking Innis Gunn Barrel-Aged Bourbon Barrel Porter.
Hey everybody, welcome back to the Beer Den Podcast. My name is Ethan Hoopy.
And I'm Michael LaRoe. So tonight we're drinking Innis Gunn, the Bourbon Barrel Porter. A little bit about them. They started crafting beers in 2003 by Dougal Gunn Sharp. They ended up buying their own brewery in 2016. And they're actually our first import we've had on the podcast. They're from Perthshire, Scotland.
Hey.
They pride themselves on adding a fifth element to their beers. So you traditionally have your hops, your malts, yeast, and water. They add what they call the fifth element is a barrel to it. And they have two methods that they do this because most of their stuff is barrel aged.
Yeah.
Their first method that they have, they call beer into barrel, which is your traditional, we're going to age it in a bourbon barrel or whatever kind of barrel. The second method is just the opposite. It's barrel into beer. And so what they actually do is they
Dunk a barrel into a beer.
Kinda. So they have like their brewing vats and they char and chop up these bourbon barrels or again, whatever it is that they're aging it with. And they soak that into the beer and it imparts the flavor from that.
Okay.
So it's a pretty interesting way to do that method. Usually it's the first one where you just pour the beer.
And I know that we've already tried some of the, at least one. I don't think they were cutting up barrels and putting that in. But
yeah, so I found that pretty interesting. And like I said, they started their own brewery in 2016. So while they've been around since 2003, they didn't start distributing beer until just a couple years ago.
That's really cool.
Yeah.
And especially it's our first import, came here all the way from Scotland.
This one looks beautiful. We, as fans of the podcast, know we're more towards the stouts and darker beer.
Yeah, for sure.
For favoritism,
so this is definitely right up our alley.
This is definitely up there.
And especially like the last, the whiskey barrel one that we tried, we were really impressed with like the types of flavors that you can get out of barrel aging beer. And this is no exception. It is definitely a very unique beer. You can definitely tell it's a porter. It has some of those those porter-like qualities, but with something extra. And it's really nice.
Right.
What did you think about the color and the smell and stuff of it?
So it's a very opaque beer, very dark black. Aroma is what really hit me because it has a very nice, sweet, malty scent to it. You really get the notes of chocolate. They say there's vanilla and orange in it, but those are a little bit harder to pick out.
Yeah, I didn't really notice those nearly as much. But yeah, that smell, it's really unique for a beer to smell just as sweet as this. I kind of, the first thing that came to mind was berries, it was very fruity.
So this one didn't pour with much of a head. It doesn't have lacing that sticks to the side of the glass.
Yeah.
But I'm not really going to hold that against it. Again, that aroma is what really draws me in for this.
Yeah, for sure.
It's very sweet. Mouthfeel, it was slightly tingly. I noticed a really fast carbonation on the bubbling.
I felt like it almost came in waves, when you first take a drink of it, there's one kind of burst of flavor. And then after you swallow, there almost was a second burst of flavor that came with it. It was just kind of interesting. And yeah, really enjoyed the sweetness of it. There's a lot of chocolate notes in it and stuff.
Again, the chocolate note seems to be
very predominant. Yeah. It was definitely the biggest flavor out of everything. The vanilla and orange. Yeah, I just didn't taste it nearly as much.
I don't taste any orange from this.
Yeah. But I mean, still, it's still a great beer.
So this had a pretty low astringency in my opinion. It was a slightly drying body, but not harsh
The
by any
finish
means.
wasn't super dry, I felt like. Bitterness,
I thought it was moderate. I mean, it's a little bit bitter, but...
Yeah, but nothing like, it's... I guess I would say it's probably pretty mild as far as bitterness, so...
Flavor-wise... Again, chocolate seems to be the predominant flavor for it.
Yep.
There is just a slight alcohol taste, but vanilla and orange don't really pick up those hints, even though
I'm sure they're there.
There. What I was surprised on this one was it kind of lacks the bourbon flavor compared to the other bourbon barrel ale from Alltech that we had. Alltech's had a pretty strong bourbon flavor to it, whereas this one, it's there, you kind of get it.
Yeah.
But it doesn't seem like as potent of a bourbon flavor.
I totally agree with that the Alltech, the bourbon flavor, I felt like I noticed it mostly with the smell of the Alltech. The Alltech was like, we thought it was going to be way more bourbon flavored just from the smell.
Mm-hmm.
And I felt like it wasn't it was more mild than we were expecting. With this, you don't really get almost any bourbon smell, flavor, or anything like that. But it's definitely it must have done something because it's definitely a unique taste.
Yeah. It imparts a subtle flavor of bourbon, but it's not overwhelming by any means. We base everything on 3 criteria. We have quality out of 50 points, value out of 25, and then design out of 25 as well. I rated this at a 39. I thought it had a really good flavor, although lacking on the bourbon, which I would expect that to be a little bit stronger with this beer. But overall, that maltiness to it, very sweet, very well balanced, not overly drying. I thought it had pretty good characteristics. What did you think on quality?
I honestly think that you were spot on with pretty much all of that. I ended up giving it a 40, and it basically exactly for the same reasons. So I don't even feel like I need to expand on it any more than that.
Fair enough. Value-wise, I gave this a 21. It comes in at $10.99 for a 4-pack, especially compared to the Alltech, which was somewhere around the $15 range for a 4-pack.
Yeah.
This was definitely a better value compared to that. I think flavor-wise, Alltech might have been a little bit better just because you had a little bit more of a bourbon taste to it, but I think that this one has a really good sweetness to it that works for a porter.
Yeah, for sure. I ended up going with a 16 for my value. I think that it is a very good beer. I can't really get over the 4-pack stuff. You're kind of missing out on 2 whole beers for the price. And kind of the thing is, I do think that this is probably a way more expensive beer to produce, especially because you're aging, everything.
Well, that and with it being an import, I would expect it to be a little bit higher price.
So I guess I get it, but and it is still again, it's still a very good beer. It's just I wish if it would come in a 6-pack for $10.99, I think I'd be giving it a 20, but. It doesn't, so I can't.
Design-wise, I scored this at a 23. I was pretty impressed with the bottle design. It has a slight hourglass kind of shape to it. There's a lot of stamping in it for the brewery itself.
Yeah, it's actually like a custom bottle.
Yeah, I love seeing that when breweries are able to do that. It has the neck label on it. The coloring, a nice purple and gold foil, really makes it seem, they even have the description, deep, rich, and complex. And it's a nice deep purple. That gold color is very holographic, makes it look fancy and rich. And the flavors itself are really complex. So I feel like that really describes this whole package.
It's very accurate. I really get a Western sort of vibe from it. Very fancy. It definitely draws your eye to it.
Mm-hmm.
Also, it has a description on the back, which is actually a pretty good description. It's brief, but it's at least strictly about the beer. Sometimes we get descriptions that kind of go off on their own and maybe
Right.
talk about other stuff. And like, I mean, to each their own, but I like to actually know more about what I'm going to be drinking. It has the alcohol by volume right next to it, pretty clearly labeled.
A 7.4%.
Yep.
What I liked on this, it did have a call to their website. I docked it points because it doesn't have when it was bottled.
The one thing that I do see that it has that's kind of cool is the master brewer's signature on it, which is, I don't know, that's kind of a neat little thing. I mean, I have no idea what it says, but...
So looking closer at the bottle, something I just noticed is it actually does have a bottle date. On my bottle, it's actually covered up by a label, so I'm going to stick with the score that I have. But on Ethan's, it is actually visible. So
barely, but it is
there,
visible.
But it's... depending on where it's at, it could be hard to read. So maybe it's something in their process.
It's just stamped on the actual glass of it, so it's not very clearly marked like on the actual label itself. But yeah. I mean, at least it's there. As far as design, I ended up giving it a 22. I think it was really good, touching on all the points that we normally look for.
All right, sounds good. So that is a 78 out of 100 for you, an 83 for myself. So that gives it an 80.5 on the Innis Gunn barrel-aged bourbon barrel porter.
Hey everybody, thank you for listening to another Beer Den review.
Don't forget to follow us on social media, links down in the description.
Subscribe, like, and share. And if there are any beers you would like us to try out, leave them in the comments below.
We'll see you on the next episode of the Beer Den Podcast.